Hello, and welcome to Simple Life Philosophy. This is the channel where you follow my life in an attempt to find a philosophy of life that is both simple to understand and to execute, and that will lead me to a more productive and more peaceful life down the road. Just living a simple life and enjoying my life as much as possible, with the ultimate goal being happiness. I want to thank everybody who's recently subscribed. Thank you very much. But also, if you haven't subscribed to the channel and you keep coming back here, why haven't you subscribed yet? Becomes a really good question. So if you haven't done that, please subscribe. I appreciate it. Make sure you like the video, comment. I really appreciate your comments because it allows me to kind of get some feedback on thoughts and things like that. And so that's always good. Well, this is, after all, a philosophy of life channel. We're thinking about what we're trying to do, how we're trying to do it. And so it's always good to have a community of like-minded individuals that are trying to get that done. Now today starting basically a small mini-series on the 12 Stoic Exercises. And these I haven't come up with on my own. I'm literally taking them from this book, How to Be a Stoic, by Massimo Pigliucci. Pigliucci, that's right, Pigliucci, no G, even though it's in there. The G is silent, weird. Latin, Italian is weird. But it's like, for me, he gives 12 exercises in the final chapter of this book. And I'm going to do a review of this book. I've been trying to review it chapter by chapter, but it takes an awful lot of time to deep dive and do it that way. And I want to get on to other books of philosophy, so it's taking a lot longer than I had hoped. So probably what I'll do is I'll do a final review of this book and then I'll move on. But today I want to start a series, a three-part series, where I talk about these 12 exercises and what my concept of them and how I understand them and how I put them into practice a little bit for my own life. Because really, a philosophy of life is great, but if you never put it into practice, it's really kind of just talking out, everything. You're talking about something, but you're not putting it into practice. And we definitely want to be practicing our simple life philosophy, not just thinking about it, okay? Now, I'm going to do the first 4 that he mentions in this, and I'm going to start out with number 1, examine your impressions. Basically what it's saying is, when you have an emotional impression, when you have a certain feeling about a certain action or thing, the exercise is basically to take a step back from that for a second and examine what that impression is and why you have it. Okay, because a lot of times, if we take a few seconds to say, no, wait a minute, why is this person doing X? Or what situation is this? And, I'm feeling kind of this, why? Okay, if you take a step back, and this is really a very good practical exercise, because it causes us to get away from the instant being led away by our emotions, and causes us to simply say, no, wait a minute, back up here. Let's examine our impressions here. Why do we have this impression of this thing? Why are we feeling this emotion? Why are we looking at it this way? And it's a simple exercise. It doesn't really call you to do anything other than back up a little bit and examine what's going on. And this is a helpful exercise for any activity, because sometimes people say things and your immediate reaction is to get offended or get angry or get sad about it. And you have to ask yourself the question, well, why am I feeling that way? Why am I looking at it that way? It doesn't seem to make a lot of sense. After a while, you begin to think about it and your impressions begin to become more and more clear. Now, for me, I think I've always kind of done this to a certain extent in my life, and maybe that's the adult autism or the autism in general as I've grown up. Because I have a tendency to automatically, as part of my personality, to just kind of take a breath and look around and go, oh, okay, what am I feeling here? Okay, let's go this direction. And as everybody knows, I have trouble expressing my feelings because of masking and other things like that. But I'm learning through this particular exercise how to take responsibility. Okay, I have this emotion or I have this impression. Why does that exist? And how useful is it? Is it a proper impression or expression? Or maybe is there something else that I need to take a closer look here? The exercise is simply to pause, take a breath, and examine exactly what's going on. And for me, I've kind of done this most of my life, but I think Stoic philosophy allowed me, and this book in particular, allowed me to put a nuts and bolts of what am I doing this for? And the answer is, okay, once I understand my impressions, then I can do something about it. Because the ultimate goal of examining your impressions is, do I have power over this? Do I have influence over this? Or is this something beyond my power and influence? And okay, then do I need to focus on this impression or not? Because if it's beyond my power, then it's kind of a wasted emotion or impression. So maybe I need to get it back to what I can do something about. Maybe, this is too big, but you know what? I can control my attitude about it. Or I can say this to influence the situation, but I'm not counting on it changing around just because I say so. Number 2 of the exercise, remind yourself of the impermanence of things. In other words, constantly remind yourself that everything is temporary, including you. A lot of the practical exercise, like Epictetus himself will say, if you have a lover, kiss that lover and say, to yourself, I'm kissing a mortal person that's going to die. And that sounds really morbid, except it causes you to really appreciate that person or that activity or whatever it is, if you really like it, even more. I think when you remind yourself of the impermanence of things, it allows you to do some of the other exercises. It opens that door. Because we're going to talk about the next one, which is kind of the reserve clause, but this is the doorway to that. Because if you don't back up and say, wow, this is impermanent, like you have a job situation, remind yourself that that job situation is impermanent. It's not permanent. You're not going to be there forever, okay? The people you work with, the situation at work is constantly changing and evolving and everything else. Your family life, if you have a partner or married or whatever, remind yourself that is not a permanent thing. And of course, looking at yourself, okay, you're not permanent either. You're not going to be around forever either. Now, why is that important? Because it leads to the third one, which is the reserve clause. Because one of my things, and this is where me as an atheist Stoic really hammers home to me, is when I have learned that, sometimes I really waste my time when I'm with my people that I love. Okay, do you understand? If you're with family, and it really gets annoying sometimes. I look around at times at family gatherings or friend gatherings, and you got people on their flipping phone. I mean, you're in a moment that may not pass, that is never going to pass that way again, because that moment, that time, that weekend you're spending with your family, you don't know if you're going to get another one. And it reminds you that, that person that you live with or care about, they're not going to be there forever either. And the reserve clause says, I need to find a way to take joy in things. So on the one hand, when I'm in a situation where that may not come around again, is to sit back and enjoy it and move forward with it and really have it. I realize that, sometimes when I go to a family gathering or I go to breakfast once a week, usually with my daughter, I go to her house and eat with the grandkids and everything else. It's time for me to keep the cell phone in the pocket and enjoy the moment with them, have the conversations with them. Now, sometimes I pull out my cell phone to look something up we're talking about or whatever, just to get some better information. But it becomes the tool rather than enslaving me. On the other hand, I try to, in this, remind myself that bad situations are going to come up too. And those are impermanent, and those require the reserve clause as well. Because I can either let a bad situation rob me of my happiness and joy, or I can say, you know what, this is just temporary. Let's deal with the problem. Let's find a way to get a solution. Let's get past our impressions and remind ourselves that this isn't the end all be all, and get to the idea of okay, I'm going to pull back my emotions and reserve them and focus on what I can do something about. The reserve clause is actually one of the most practical rubber meet the road Stoic things for me, because it's okay, Good situation, enjoy it. Enjoy the joy of it. Get the happiness of it. Bad situation, find a way to get around it, get past it, but deal with it. But deal with that which you can control. Remind yourself, is this an impression I can control, or is it something I can't? And then, of course, we get to the next one, number 4. Where can I use virtue here? How do I use virtue in the here and now? Now, the problem I have with a lot of things that I used to do about virtue, and maybe you experience this as well, is a lot of times when I talked about virtue, I would often think, okay, could I have applied virtue to this situation? What this exercise does is pulls me from later on meditating on the problem, which I'm not saying you shouldn't do. But the question is, where can I use virtue in the here and now? Okay, let's go back to my situation where I'm at my family's home, enjoying their company. Well, for me, that's the virtue of fidelity, being loyal to family, being with them. Hospitality is in there, either engaging in hospitality or enjoying hospitality. The other side of the virtue of hospitality is enjoying the hospitality of others. Am I spending time and honoring people that I'm supposed to? Am I doing the right thing as I'm enjoying that situation? See, that's the thing. How am I applying those virtues now? Because it's all too tempting to go and, in retrospect, look back at events and go, hey, I could have done this, I could have done that. And that's not the time to really do it. If you're facing a difficult situation, okay, how do I apply industriousness now? How do I apply courage now? I mean, the time to apply courage is not thinking about it afterwards. It's when the fearful thing comes up and you have to do the right thing in the right moment. You have to protect those you care about. It's not a time to say, oh man, I'll have to think about this later, how I could have done this better. It's a time, how do I do it here and now? And I think what this exercise has done for me is it's gotten me past this waiting till the aftermath of a situation to think about how I could have improved it. Instead, I think, okay, what virtue fits here right now? Okay, if I'm facing a situation where I hear somebody knowingly say something I know to be false, okay, then it's truth, and for me, truth is, I will speak true words regardless of whether they're hard or easy truth. I will either stand and speak the truth or I will sit in silence and say nothing. Okay, if nobody's going to listen to me, I'm not going to waste my breath, but I'm going to know the truth, and I'm going to know that that person is not to be trusted. Okay, when I know, or at least not trusted in an issue, they might be ignorant, but sometimes when I hear people speak falsehoods, I know for a fact they're lying. And it's at that moment you would judge a person on whether or not they stand for the truth. One of my interesting things, and the way I differ now from Christianity that I used to practice, if I know somebody's being deceptive toward me, then I don't have to be honest with them necessarily. Now, I usually always am, because I think it's better to take the high road and not become like your enemy. To me, that is the best revenge. That's one Stoic idea that I really enjoy. And so the virtue is, I'm going to still stand for the truth, even if people are standing for falsehood. Okay, and that's a hard thing. But it's the virtue that I need to use now. When I'm going through a rough time, hey, I got to persevere through this. I got to get through it. Sometimes I need to do the right thing, even when nobody's watching. And that's kind of what I'm talking about with what virtue appears now. Now, these are the first 4 exercises. Examine your expressions, reminding yourself of how impermanent things are, good or bad, people you love, people you hate. Use the reserve clause, back up a little bit and go, if it's a joyful situation, learn to be in that situation and enjoy it. If it's a hard situation, learn how to be reserved about it, figure a way out through it. And most of the time what you're doing in all of that is trying to figure out which virtue to follow and which virtue to go forward. But all in all, these 4 exercises so far, and of the 12, I have found very helpful, for me at least. We're going to get into some of the rest of them as I go through this series, but I wanted to do the first 4. This book, I'm going to do a review of it later, but if you're watching just this video, I would recommend it. If you're really interested in what the bottom line foundation of Stoicism is, and it's a very practical exercise to start testing out to see if it works for you, how to be a Stoic. Massimo Pigliucci, great guy. I've seen some of his TED Talks. He seems to be a decent human being, and very much helpful in how to live our life and live our life much better. Well, thank you for stopping by. This has been Simple Life Philosophy. I've been your host, Ed Raby. I appreciate every comment below. I mean, if you have some thoughts on this, I'd really appreciate hearing them. Like the video, share it with your friends if you think they'd be interested in this kind of content. Everything you do grows the channel. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel and hit that notification bell for more content it is as it is released. In the meantime, once again, this has been Ed Raby at Simple Life Philosophy, and I'm hoping that you step forward and live your life like a Stoic and do the right thing, be there, do the things that you need to, live the virtuous life, live the simple life. And that's all for today, and just thank you for stopping by once again, and you have a good one.